Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for staying with us. Congressional leaders are vowing to take action after being briefed on the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi Tuesday. CIA Director Gina Haspel met with a small bipartisan group of senators, and some of the lawmakers are calling for a full Senate briefing on the classified information so steps can be taken to hold the Saudi crown prince responsible for the killing.
There's not a smoking gun, there's a smoking saw. You have to be willfully blind not to come to the conclusion that this was orchestrated and organized by people under the command of MBS, and that he was intricately involved in the demise of Mr. Khashoggi. It is zero chance, zero, that this happened in such an organized fashion without the Crown Prince.
Now, the calls for action put lawmakers at odds with the White House. President Trump has previously cast doubt that Mohammed bin Salman was involved, placing importance on economic relations with Saudi Arabia. And joining me now is Joe Colvin, who is a White House reporter for the Associated Press. Joe, good to see you.
You too.
What actions can Congress take to hold the Crown Prince responsible?
Well, Congress has been discussing a number of different measures that they can take in order to punish the Crown Prince individually, and also other people close to him, as well as Saudi Arabia more broadly. Something they've been discussing now in the Senate has been a resolution that would impact the assistance that the U.S. has been giving to the Saudis on the ground in Yemen, which is an area where there's been a lot of pushback to the American involvement there. However, depends right now. We're very close to the end of the session right now, and Paul Ryan has made clear that at least for this year, this is something that he's not interested in having the House take up. There's also been a lot of discussion about the role that Congress can play in limiting arms sales. This is something that the president has been very interested in. He's been talking about it nonstop, explaining that these arms sales that Saudis have agreed to purchase from the United States is one of the reasons why he doesn't want to, ramp up hostilities and take a harder line on this. And we could see Congress choosing to try to take some steps to at least delay that from taking effect.
So how might Haspel's briefing Tuesday impact the White House's strategy regarding the Saudi kingdom?
It's interesting. You already had members of Congress, including people like Lindsey Graham, you saw his words up there very strongly, who have long believed that the CIA has concluded, or long believed intelligence agencies, that MBS clearly, if he didn't direct this, he at least knew about it, and had the way that Graham described it was using the word complicit, was complicit in this murder. And you've seen them trying to pressure the White House, trying to push them to move and to act and to do something. And it seemed like the briefing today from Gina Haspel, which is something that they had pushed for after they received a briefing last week from people like Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, they walked out of this briefing even more convinced in what they previously believed. What they're pushing for now is to expand the number of people who are being briefed by Haspel, who has listened to that CIA tape, who was there, took a trip to the Middle East to find out what had happened there herself. And they're now pushing for more members of Congress to hear from her directly, hoping to build more momentum in Congress to take additional steps to check the White House.
All right, Joe, I want to switch gears if we can. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced Tuesday plans to pull out from a missile treaty with Russia. The withdrawal will happen in 60 days unless the Kremlin reverses course. Listen to this.
If Russia admits its violations and fully and verifiably comes back into compliance, we will, of course, welcome that course of action. But Russia and Russia only can take this step. We appreciate NATO's strong support for the United States decision as expressed in this statement released today. The United States and our NATO allies stand vigilant that Russia's lawless conduct will not be tolerated in the realm of arms control or anywhere else.
All right, Jill, so how has the Trump administration's stance on Russia shifted in recent weeks?
Well, it's really interesting here because you've got sort of these two tracks. You've got what's happening here with Pompeo, starting this 60-day clock now. We'd heard from other government officials that this was something that they were interested in doing, but now you've got the 60-day clock that's going to be starting as of today, and increased criticism over the last couple of weeks, including in response to this action that we've been seeing of Russia attacking some Ukrainian vessels, and you saw that the president decided he was supposed supposed to meet with Vladimir Putin, sit down with him for a formal meeting at the G20 in Argentina over this weekend. He decided to cancel that meeting because of those attacks. And you've really seen, on one hand, then these tensions mounting, the U.S. kind of taking, stronger stances against Putin's government. At the same time, we haven't heard much of a change in Trump's rhetoric. This is a president who, from the time he started running for president, has always, been eager and willing to praise Putin as somebody who is a strong leader, as somebody who has the respect of his people. And we haven't heard that same line of criticism yet from the president. It'll be interesting to see whether that changes.
All right, so sticking with foreign policy, the president agreed to new talks with China over the escalating tariff wars this weekend. However, the Dow Jones fell 800 points during trading hours Tuesday, indicating that there is some uneasiness among investors. What's behind this apparent confusion regarding the trade truce?
Well, what you're seeing here is the markets reacting with confusion about exactly what the president and Xi agreed to during that dinner that they had on the sidelines of the G20. You had Xi, you had President Trump after that dinner really sounding very optimistic, announcing this historic agreement that the two sides had made, talking about how, the president talked about how, suddenly China would be purchasing all of these goods. They'd be buying farm goods. There would be a huge reduction in auto tariffs. All of these things would be happening. And then when the president returned to American soil, there were no details from U.S. officials. These were agreements that China has yet to confirm have actually taken place. You had disagreements between the president's own advisors, people like Treasury Secretary Mnuchin contradicting Larry Kudlow, the chief economic advisor, and the White House really not being able to provide details. And so what you're seeing now is the markets responding to that and going, well, wait, you know what? Maybe this isn't as positive as we thought it is, and maybe this agreement or this disagreement, this trade disagreement between these two countries is going to continue. You saw the president's tweets earlier today. Just a couple of minutes ago, he tweeted yet again, adding more uncertainty to whether there's actually going to be a deal.
Joe, Congress introduced a temporary funding bill to avoid a government shutdown for 2 weeks. This will allow them to hash out a deal after the ceremonies honoring the late President George H.W. Bush. How will the extra time impact the spending debate there in Congress?
Well, it seems like it's just at this point a bit of a pause. All of Congress, all of Washington has really come to a standstill this week to commemorate the former president. The Bush family is staying just across the street right now at Blair House. The president took time today to meet for about 20 minutes with former President Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush. He and Melania Trump went over there. So this is what the focus in Washington is right now. Look, there are still calls taking place. The president and his staff are still engaged in negotiations. But what it feels like right now is we've just pressed the pause button. There are still funding decisions that need to be made. The president has not dropped his call for $5 billion for this border wall that he is desperate to get money for before Congress changes hands and Democrats take over the House. And the fact is that Democrats are not willing to budge on that. Chuck Schumer has made very clear that he is not interested in giving the president what he wants here. And so once these 2 weeks are up, once we hit December 21st, we're going to have a very narrow time before Christmas, before the holidays start, and it doesn't seem like they're getting any closer to an agreement.
All right, Jill, you're just an expert on a lot of topics. I got one more to throw at you. Lastly, former Vice President Joe Biden made an eye-catching announcement Monday saying, quote, "I am the most qualified person in the country to run for president." Should we expect Biden to launch a 2020 bid soon?
If it hasn't been made blatantly clear over the last couple of days, we are already in 2020. Just ignore what your calendar says. It has begun. And at this point, we have so many potential Democratic candidates. I mean, the list is arguably longer than it was for the Republican side in 2016, when we just had that humongous field of candidates that led to the emergence of Trump as the frontrunner. You've got people like Joe Biden who are out there, but also dozens and dozens of others, from Elizabeth Warren to Kamala Harris to governors and mayors, Michael Bloomberg in Iowa today. This race is really, starting to ramp up. In terms of timing, Biden says it's still going to be a while, a couple months, while he considers what he's going to do. Typically, candidates start, they say that they'll make these decisions over the holidays as they talk to their families, and then you start to really get clear indications about who's in January, February, with formal announcements in the summertime. So we'll see if that same timeline lines up this year. But look, it sounds like Biden really is considering this very strongly.
Definitely keeps the conversation entertaining. All right. Thank you so much, Jill Colvin at the White House. Jill, thank you.
Thank you.